On this episode, we're going to answer the question that's on everybody's mind right now. What the heck is going on in France? Hello and welcome to Dirty Christianity, the show where we investigate, explore, challenge, and get down and dirty with Christianity. My name is Alex, and as you might have already guessed, we're taking a look at the controversial Olympics opening ceremony. It seems like everyone in the world has an opinion on it, and as is fairly typical with viral social media commentary, a lot of it sucks. So, since I've been talking about the importance of truth for the last few episodes, I think it's important to inject a little bit of nuance into the discussion. As is often the case on social media, what could have been an informative and educational conversation quickly devolved into misinformation and gaslighting. For those who don't know, gaslighting is a toxic behavior and a form of manipulation and abuse where you try to convince somebody that they didn't see or hear what they thought they did, or that their feelings about something are incorrect or don't matter. So why am I calling it that? Well, on the one hand, you have people who were, rightly or wrongly, offended by the representation. And on the other hand, you have people sharing posts about how these American Christians are overreacting or being too sensitive, or my personal favorite, are just uncultured and ignorant. It was obviously a representation of a Bacchanalia, or a festival of Dionysus, or the Feast of the Gods. I'm not even sure what the general consensus is anymore because it's changed so much. But clearly, it was a celebration of Greek culture because the Olympics started in Greece. And everybody who was offended by it is just misrepresenting it because they want something to be offended by. I find it so hilariously ironic when people were insulting Americans for being uncultured trash urchins and then saying that it was a Bacchanalia. Dionysus was the Greek god of a lot of things, but most famously wine and revelry. The Romans came along and basically copy-pasted the Greek pantheon, and Dionysus became Bacchus. As you might tell from the name, Bacchanalia was a Roman celebration of the Roman god Bacchus. And although the name is often used interchangeably by most people, festivals of Dionysus and a Bacchanalia are not the same thing. The Roman version is where the idea that they were basically just wild, drunken orgies out in the wilderness came from. The Greek version had a lot going on, but it was more of a celebration of the arts because Dionysus was also the god of theater. So it wasn't a Bacchanalia because it's meant to be Greek, right? And the blue guy was Dionysus, except Dionysus isn't depicted as blue, so that's different. And all of the performers were meant to be different Greek gods, so it's not just a festival of Dionysus. But maybe it's the Feast of the Gods by a famous artist whose name I honestly can't pronounce, but who also wasn't Greek. But the opening ceremony director did say that it was meant to be a big pagan party. That's about as definite an answer as we have. Everything else is people interpreting the art how they see it, because that is how art is viewed, through the eye of the beholder. And art can also have more than one meaning. It is entirely possible that the performance was a festival of Greek gods and meant to subtly poke at a very famous and important representation of Christianity. In fact, that wouldn't be abnormal at all in France. France is very proud of its secular society. French culture in general and many French people are hostile to, or at the minimum, critical of religion. And mocking religious beliefs is not uncommon. Just look at the Charlie Hebdo controversy, or Charlie Hebdo for many people in America, from several years ago. And this cultural backdrop is precisely why it's not just American Christians being upset over this. That's another example of gaslighting, trying to make it seem like it's just ignorant Americans. There were many representatives of Christian churches in other parts of the world who also saw what they believed to be mockery, including the French Catholic Church. I feel like the French church would have a better understanding of the underlying French culture of this hostility towards religion than American social media commenters. So it isn't just Americans, and it isn't even clear what the performance was exactly. Some Olympic officials seem to have said that there was a nod to Da Vinci's The Last Supper, and others seem to have denied that. That's a lot of ambiguity and interpretation at play here. And to try to invalidate people's feelings when they are offended by something that is open to interpretation because you don't see things the same way is the bedrock of toxic gaslighting. Now, it's equally likely, if not more likely, that this whole entire thing was truly a big misunderstanding, and the director honestly did not mean to offend anyone. For one thing, the picture going around that makes it look like the performance was a close parallel has been deceptively cropped to emphasize the similarities. There were more than 13 people. It wasn't a table at all, it was a runway, and the scene in question with everybody on one side is only a part of a larger story. There was a gap in the performers to allow the camera access, but there were dozens of people on either side. Taken as a whole, the similarities quickly diminish. As Christians, we also need to get out of this headspace that everyone in the world sees things the same as us. The Last Supper is a very important event in Christianity, and the painting of it is a famous and beloved interpretation of this special moment in our faith. But if you're not of our faith, then this moment and this painting suddenly aren't near as important. I'm sure the director has seen this painting before when he put the performance together. It's a very famous piece of art, but that doesn't mean that he was trying to intentionally mock it or trying to draw comparisons to it. The opening ceremony was supposed to unite and connect people, and the director has apologized for any offense that people saw in his art because that wasn't his intent. But all of this begs a very important question. How should Christians respond when we are offended? Because whether you think they should have been or not, a great many people were. Some responded with barely controlled aggression and hatred. Some responded with conspiracies of demonic influence. Some are boycotting the Olympics, and some just said, hey, I didn't think this was appropriate. I personally find it really hard to reconcile love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you with hatred and hostility and aggression. But in trying to be good Christians, do we need to just be quiet and accept the mockery and hatred that sometimes comes our way? Luke 6 says, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. When people are insulted or offended, it is completely natural to respond in kind. It's human nature. But what Jesus is telling us in Luke 6 is that if we allow our human nature to dictate our actions and our reactions, then what good is our faith? How are we, as Christians, any different from anyone else if we respond the same way to adversity? So how are we supposed to respond then? Well, what Jesus says is, with mercy. Now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be offended. You are allowed to feel however you feel. And people who try to invalidate your feelings or dismiss them are wrong to do that. But what you do with those feelings is what is supposed to separate us from non-believers. Micah 6:8 is my favorite verse, and it tells us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. I particularly like my pastor's explanation for what justice means in the Bible. He describes it as facilitating positive human relationships. Justice is what helps us to love each other, to heal, to come together, to build each other up, and to restore each other. So we are supposed to do justice, to pray for and love those who persecute us, and to be merciful even when people are hurtful towards us. You can be upset. You can feel offended and insulted and say so. And doing justice doesn't mean allowing people to walk all over you. But when we respond, it needs to be built around restoring what was broken. That is justice. As Christians, we believe that holding on to anger and nursing grudges is toxic for us. That is a major focus of forgiveness. God forgives us, and this helps us to forgive others, so we don't have to hold on to hateful things. But that doesn't mean that we also don't address the problem or the thing that caused the hurt. In the context of today, we could have said, hey, I didn't like that performance. I thought it was too close to something that I really care about and it bothered me. Please apologize. The Olympic ceremony was supposed to unite people, and instead it really upset me. Maybe you didn't realize why this picture is so important to me. Let me explain. We could have turned a hurtful moment into a learning opportunity and had a genuine conversation with people from all over the world who don't think like us. Instead, we got outrage and gaslighting with religious and secular leaders and influencers on both sides using the opportunity to fan the flames for their own benefit. That's not justice. At this point, there's really only two possibilities with all of this. Option one is that the director did not realize the parallels and made an honest mistake, in which case the correct response is to forgive him and to move on in justice and in love. Option two is that he meant to draw connections with it and was trying to subtly mock us, in which case the correct response is to forgive him and move on in justice and in love. You are allowed to be upset by all of this. You are also allowed to think that people are overreacting and blowing it out of proportion. But regardless of which side you are on, we should respond by trying to heal a broken situation, or to help people heal who were hurt, even if you don't agree with why. That is justice. That is what it means to be a Christian. And that is why Christianity can be so hard to do, because it requires us to let go of our natural human reactions and to try to forgive and love people who we don't always like. Jesus forgave the people who nailed him to a cross. He experienced more pain and anguish than most humans, if not anyone, will ever have to endure. And he still forgave them. Now, I'm not Jesus, so I don't think I could do that. But I'm also not getting nailed to a cross. And if Jesus was able to forgive them, I can certainly try to forgive the people who only offended me. Thanks for watching.